Welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Inside Track. We've got a fantastic guest this morning, Jack Thomas. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Absolute pleasure. Now, I wanted to get you on for a little bit because you've got some great new developments coming, which I've been following, which we'll come into a little bit later down the line. But I mean, you're CEO of the FitGuide, CEO of Base Gyms, and you've got your own podcast. So you're a busy lad. Do you want to, some of our guests, because obviously you're based out in Bangkok, so some of our listeners here in the UK might not know who you are. Do you want to give us just a quick sort of brief career history, who Jack is, what you've been doing up to now?
Yeah, sure thing. So originally from Bristol in England, came traveling to Thailand in 2003 and never left. So I was doing a few different things. I was teaching English for a while. I had a clothing export business for about 5 or 6 years. So I kind of got a bit of a taste of running a business, employing a few people, developing a bit of a brand. But really what I learned then didn't prepare me much for what came later. That business, the clothing export business, got hit hard around 2009 in line with the global economic crisis. The pound lost a lot of value. That really hurt the business massively. And I was really at a crossroads and not sure what to do. Decided to take a step into the fitness industry. Now, there was nothing really happening in Thailand at the time, or just a few sort of chain gyms starting to come in. But there was no real sort of premium boutique side. Not really. I mean, funnily enough, when I was younger, I wanted to be a PE teacher. It just looked fun. It was in fitness. It was in sport. And that's what I've always enjoyed. So I always kind of saw maybe some kind of career in that. But as soon as I left school, I got busy with going out and partying and everything else and kind of forgot about that dream. So it kind of made sense later on when I decided to step into the fitness industry. I've been sporty. I'd kind of had my ups and downs with my own sort of weight and fitness over the years, going from like being a little bit chubby to really fit, training for a half marathon or something like that. So it wasn't like a totally unfamiliar step into fitness, really. It kind of made sense. So when I did that in Thailand, it was nothing really happening, nothing really going on. I was working for a very small studio, which was like a converted office, doing boot camps in the park, taking all the personal training sessions that I could. And then a year later, we opened what really you would consider the first premium boutique fitness center in Bangkok. So we were charging premium rates, group class and personal training, no open gym. And it was really the start of the boutique segment in Thailand, really. About a year later, a lot of other gyms started opening up. I became manager of that facility and then managing director. And then about 5 years into that journey, I decided I was ready to set up my own brand and my own business. That was kind of the stage I was at, and that turned me on. So I left that studio, took about 9 months developing my own brand and my own business called Base. So we set up our first location in 2016, second location a year afterwards, third location a year after that. And in 2018, as I opened our third location, I set up a podcast, Fitness Business Asia. And as we were discussing before we hit live, it was kind of to network, to improve my public speaking a little bit, to connect with people in the industry. And that's gone really well. It's become a weekly podcast. We're at episode 250 now. We've interviewed a ton of people from around Asia, but also the US and the UK. So over lockdowns, we started pulling in guests from around the world. So yes, definitely been very busy. And my latest hat is co-founder of the FitGuide, which I'm sure we'll get onto.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to get onto that at the end because I'm fascinated by what you guys are doing with that. So, what in terms of Base? How did obviously you come through as a studio manager and then obviously manager director and so on. But what made you go for that style of club? Because I can imagine at the time nothing there. You sort of going, well, okay, what do we do to make Base so successful? Because you've won awards with it, from what I was reading, you've done really well with that brand. So taking that from nothing to an award-winning business is quite a significant jump.
Yeah, so when I went to the lab, we were the first studio in Bangkok. So just the fact that we were offering sort of premium circuit training and foreign trainers, that was our differentiator. Now, 4 years later, when I opened Base, there was a lot happening in the industry at that time. So I had to be a little bit more clever and think a bit more about what would be our USP, what would be our differentiator. And I'd been to New York, I'd been to Sydney and London and visited the top gyms. And I really liked the whole sort of cardio and strength mix that was quite popular there. So I kind of created a concept which was based around the kind of training that I liked, that I did, and it combined strength and cardio. So we brought in treadmills, air bikes, rowers at a time when no one was using those in Bangkok, and incorporated that into our training. And then we started building technology to track and record clients' results, which has just continued being developed over the last 6 or 7 years. So as you go through a group class, you enter in the weights that you've lifted on the strength sets, the distances, the times that you've hit on the cardio sets, and we have an app that backs that up as well. So we had to think a bit more about it because there was more happening in the industry than when we first set up, that initial studio.
And have you guys kept that internal? You've not franchised that out. You've kept it as your guys' business, and you're looking to grow that further.
We have, yes. We were looking at expanding through a franchise model in 2020. We were looking very closely at Singapore, but obviously that got shelved and put back a little bit. Potentially still doing that. It's not our focus at the moment, but I think that what we've built, I think, would do well in the busier fitness market. So we are looking at probably Singapore as a next step for that brand.
Fantastic. And in terms of sort of owners coming into now, obviously it's a different market to the UK and the US. I mean, what would you say is probably the difference in Bangkok to over here, or is it very similar, just not as mature?
Yeah, I mean, setting up a business in Thailand has more bureaucracy, more red tape. It's definitely a bit harder than it is in the UK, for sure. I've got a really good team around me, and I have Thai business partners, which have really helped with that. So when I'd never really run a proper business before, even though I had a clothing export business, it was very small. So coming into a business like this, it would have, quite a few employees and the potential to grow and everything else. I pulled in Thai partners who wanted to get into fitness, but also had their own skill set and their own background, so they could really add something to the mix. So that was really, really helpful in setting something up here. In terms of the industry, it's just a lot younger and a lot more immature. So if you compare it to London, let's say, there's a lot more money, there's a lot more studios opening up, there's a lot happening. Whereas here, I started in the industry right at the beginning of the growth curve. And now it's definitely very rocky with everything that's happened in the last few years. But being such an immature market, it's less predictable, not quite sure where it's going to go. Sometimes it can be a bit more trend-based. So they kind of jump on the latest trends. But like any market, if you focus on quality, great coaches, really strong concept, backed by technology, good brand, good service. If you get those things right in any market, you're going to do well. And we have done in Bangkok.
I think the great thing is you're in such a position at the minute with it, because the industry, the great thing about COVID, probably there's not many, but I think it did force us to make a big jump forward. We'd plateaued, especially in the UK. We had 10 years where we were pretty much doing the same thing. The only new thing that came in really in our industry over here was the fact we had all the budgets coming, which personally I didn't think was a great move, but that was the big development in our industry. You didn't really have all this technology drive and everything else. And I think because of what happened with COVID, we all shut down, everyone went, oh, we need to start engaging with clients differently and everything else. I think that really exploded the use of technology in the industry. And I think where you guys are at the minute growing, it's probably at the perfect time in that stage, because you're sort of going, well, okay, we can suck in all that technology that everybody's bringing out, make our own and make it better in a young market that's not used to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a bit of a false economy created, I think, especially in Asia when ClassPass came in. They pumped a ton of money into the industry. There was a lot of sort of rich kids, as they're sort of known here, who were running businesses that weren't really economically sound. And so the lockdowns and everything else just kind of forced those businesses out, and the real quality offerings survived. Look, there are definitely some quality businesses that were kind of on the edge and maybe didn't have the backing that have failed, and that's sad. But essentially, it's the good quality businesses that are doing good things that have survived. So that's definitely something we've seen in Asia. And now I think, it's the worldwide, people are reporting that the industry is back on the up. People are rushing back into fitness. The whole digital boom didn't quite happen in the way that many people thought. Bricks and mortar is clearly here to stay. So it's been like a really interesting, somewhat surreal few years. But I think everyone I speak to around the world is pretty positive moving forwards.
Yeah, I don't see all the doom and gloom. I mean, there's obviously clubs that are struggling, but that happens in any economy, whether it's booming or not. So, but I definitely think we've moved forward. And that digital thing, I never thought it would. I mean, if you have a look, I mean, I never understood the Peloton thing. So what they should have done is just banked all that cash and gone, okay, let's wait for things to settle, because it was never going to be long term. I mean, there was always a potential they could grow some market share as as their products got out there and a lot more people had them, but they were never going to become the new gym. It's just, the moment gyms open, people wanted to go back. People are social people. Don't want to train in your lounge. You don't want to train in your kitchen or wherever it is. You want to be in a gym, and most clubs have returned to their pre-pandemic levels and above. And so I don't know whether you saw the thing about Lululemon and because they went into that mirror. And they were on about offloading it, and I think they bought it for
500 million.
Yeah, and they're on about offloading it for less than 100 million, aren't they? And they just if they can get that, and you're going, it just I don't know where it went through their head to consider it. It's strange, isn't it?
Well, we keep getting reminders now of just how much we lost our minds over the last few years. I think that was all driven by hype and speculation. And I publicly said on the podcast, on LinkedIn, and everywhere else that I was bullish on bricks and mortar. Yes, there's a space for digital, but there was some crazy talk about how digital is going to replace the in-person experience, how people realize now that they can just train at home and they can do burpees and air squats in front of the TV, so they're not going to want to come back. And I think anyone who's in the fitness industry and anyone who sort of creates a premium experience and has something special and has a good community and everything else that the fitness industry has become, called bullshit on it. They're like, no, I just do not see that. And you try to do these workouts and look, when you're stuck at home, yeah, it was nice. You're on Zoom, you can speak to your coach. It served its purpose and it was great. But it was just, to me, blindingly obvious at the time, this was not going to be how we're going to live out the rest of our lives. No way. And actually the complete opposite happened to what many people said. They just couldn't wait to come back, couldn't wait to cancel their digital subscriptions. On the first lockdown, classes and everything else, pretty much the day we opened, our classes went from like 15 or 20 to like 2 or 3 or sometimes 1. And there's nothing more depressing than running a Zoom live stream class with one person in it. So we saw very quickly it wasn't gonna last.
But even the hybrid model, because I mean, people are still trying to push this hybrid. You need, the clubs need to be brick and mortar and have a hybrid model, and it really, I think it might have its space for certain clubs. But I generally don't believe that a club that doesn't have a hybrid model, I don't think is disadvantaged. I think it's nice to have. It probably works more as a sales USP than anything else. Look, we've got a hybrid model as well. But I don't necessarily think if you don't have it, it's put you at any disadvantage over the club that does. It's one of those things. You've got better lighting in that club or whatever. It doesn't really make that much of a difference to people, because they'll buy it and they'll never use it. That's the strange thing.
Well, most clubs have just quietly dropped it, right?
Yeah.
You know, you go on their website one day and there's no mention of it, as if it never existed. But a few are still soldiering on, and look, there's going to be a space for it, right? There are busy mums and stuff like that that can't make it in 3-4 times a week, so there is a space. I just think it's a lot smaller than a lot of people were saying.
And it's certainly not, I don't think, for that independent. I work a lot of my clients at the independent club market, and I think the amount of investment you can put into that and just waste your time, waste your energy, creating new content and stuff like that. And I think, yes, like you say, there is a market for it. I don't think Peloton will go bust. I don't think, you know what I mean? I think it will be there to stay.
It's lost like 95% of its value, right? I think it peaked at 100 and something billion, and I looked the other day and it's 3 billion. So yeah, probably won't die. It'll probably possibly get snapped up by Apple or Nike or something like that. But it's not far off, really. It's lost 95% of its value, which speaks volumes.
Well, be like Samsung phones, won't it? They'll need to redo
like
what
Nokia,
they're doing to.
Yeah.
What was the other one? BlackBerry, wasn't it? BlackBerry was the big one. Back in my day when I was at Marriott, in the late 90s, early noughties it'd have been. Everyone had BlackBerry phones, and now you just don't see them, do you? I think they've been bought out and they're long gone. So
hopefully they don't become the BlackBerry of fitness. Let's hope. I mean, I do think there's a space for digital. I actually quite like Peloton. I've tried it before, and I've been to the studio in New York and really love the whole experience of being in the studio. And if I had a massive house, then I'd probably have one and I'd use it every now and again. So there is a space for it, right? It's just not what people thought it would be.
No, exactly. I mean, Glenda, who obviously can't make it today, she's during the pandemic, because she had her own club and she sold it to Anytime. And she, during the pandemic, when they locked down, she rented out her studio bikes, rented them out, went online at home as the gym owner, and just did these studio classes. And she ended up selling some of the bikes and ended up importing more to sell out. And I think she has about 20-25 women, or men and women, but generally women, that come on 3 times a week to do a spin class, and they're still paying for it. They pay a subscription, and that started because of the pandemic. And she, like I say, she's got a nice little community going, and she still does it now. She thought it was just going to be like a stopgap. Then she sold her club, and the women were like, that, are we still doing this? Oh yeah, okay. And it just carries on now, and we're nearly 2 years past. So I guess there is a space for it. So absolutely. So obviously you went from obviously you had base, you're doing really well. How are those clubs doing now? Are they doing really well?
Yeah, they're doing well. It's not quite pre-COVID levels. 2019 we were flying. 2020, the first few months were huge. Looking very closely at Singapore, we were actually going there quite frequently to look at units. So look, we were absolutely flying, and everything was great. It's been hit hard. We're probably like 80 to 85% of where we were at. One location we had to close down because the building's renovated, so we kind of downsized a little bit. But they're opening up in 6 months, so we're in negotiations with them to open up again. So it has been tough. Personal training, we offer that, and that's been basically at 100% pre-COVID levels all the way through. Wow. So that's been really interesting. It's group class, which has taken a lot longer. People's confidence was shaken more here in Asia than it was in the UK in terms of cleanliness, in terms of safety and everything else. It took us a while here to really get back. People kind of really got out of their routines. A lot of expats left the country. So there were a lot of barriers, and the recovery hasn't been as fast as we wanted it to be. But look, we're getting there, and we're in a good position.
You're still open. That's the key. And
for sure,
just before we move on from base, I mean, what would you say is your biggest learnings from opening it up to where you guys are now?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, there's just been so many, right? And there kind of continues to be. And over the last few years, I've definitely learned a huge amount. If I had to pin it down to one, I would just say that having the foundations of being a manager, a coach and a manager before opening a gym were huge. And I think if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been successful. I see a lot of coaches that get a big ego because they're a popular coach. They run good classes. Maybe a client offers to chuck them some money and they'll open a gym together. I see it time and again. They do that and they just don't have the managerial skills. They don't have the business skills at all. And they don't have the understanding of that to seek out those skills and seek out the people that can add in those areas, and they fail. So I think being a manager really gave me a massive head start. But looking back, I didn't know as much as I thought I did. So the first 6 months were very slow. They weren't as busy as I wanted them to be and thought they would be. And so then I had to really think, okay, I'm in a good place to do this, but I'm not in a great place. I need to learn a lot more. I need to be on a constant journey of learning and development. And I think I just kind of rested on my laurels a bit, thinking, I've managed a gym for 4 years. I'm going to be absolutely fine. So although that foundation piece was crucial for success, I underestimated what it took. And I think having that realization 6 months in that, man, I need to upskill, I need to learn more, and I always need to be doing that, was like a big turning point for me, I think. See, that's probably my biggest learning.
Well, I used to work with a lot of franchises, and a lot of the owners that were coming in, I mean, from Pizza Hut, from, I don't know, petrol stations, and it always amazed me how so many of those come in without the experience or any experience of gyms or fitness, and that they've been sold this turnkey scenario. You're like going, it's a dangerous thing to do with your money, because the fitness industry really isn't a turnkey McDonald's. You know what I mean? You don't just walk in and it happens. There's so much more to fitness. I've always thought people who work in health and fitness and work to a decent level and had a good career are some of the most flexible employees you can have. They can flick to so many different other industries because they've got sales, they've got operations, they've got hospitality. There's so many skills that they learn in it that to move into another field later in life if they want to. I think there's so much more geared than other industries. But on the flip side of it, it's also one of the hardest to come into if you haven't got that experience. I think you're absolutely right. I think spend some time managing a business or trying to learn before you go and invest in something like a gym. And like say with PTs, you see it quite often. I'm a really good PT. I can say I'm going to open a gym. But the problem we have, I don't know what it's like out there, Jack, but in the UK, because we've forced so many of our personal trainers into freelance PT. So the model now for PT is it's all freelance. So in show my age, but back in my day, you came in as a gym instructor, then you became a PT, then you became a duty manager, sales manager, club manager, and you had this nice flow through to as a career. Now you come in as a gym instructor if you're lucky, freelance PT, and then management disappears. I mean, it's really hard to find really good club managers in the UK now, because you're either having to take a risk on someone because they don't have that management. Great people, but you're having to retrain a lot of skills because they just don't have it. They haven't been through the career model.
It rarely works, the coach to management route. We've been through that a lot at base. We've had one massive success. Jeff, he's an American guy. He's our fitness manager at one of our branches. He's been great, but he, to be honest, is the exception that proves the rule. Most coaches want to be a manager because they feel it's a better title. They're kind of bored of coaching. Maybe they've been doing it for 5, 6, 7 years and they want to do something else, and they don't step into management for the right reasons. And that almost always doesn't work out. And again, it's a totally different skill set. Coaches' egos get inflated because they're a great coach and they're told you're the reason why this gym is successful. You should go and open your own thing. They're told all of these stories by kind of well-meaning clients, but it ends up putting them in a difficult situation because they go and start a business that they have no business starting, really. So yeah, we see that a lot in the industry, and it's tough. As an owner, it's tough to find that good manager.
Oh, there are some out there, but I think it's a lot harder, a lot harder these days. So let's jump on to the FitGuide, because this is what I'm really interested in. I mean, obviously, I saw this a few months back that you guys are pushing it. You just launched in New York. Do you want to? I think probably the best thing to do is let you go and say what it is, what you guys are trying to do with it.
Yeah, let's do that, and then you can just jump in if you have any questions, or you can note them down and we can go into them afterwards. So I obviously have a background in fitness through everything that I've done that we've talked about. Really good friend of mine that used to live in Bangkok, Matt Lavender, has a solid background in hospitality and especially hotel evaluations. So he worked for a company in Asia that did that. Then he worked for Forbes Travel Guide, which are basically the industry standard for 5- and 4-star reviews. They've been around for about 50 years or so. They used to be Mobile Travel Guide, now Forbes Travel Guide, and they're kind of the industry standard for 5- and 4-star reviews. So he knew that process intimately, inside out. He was director of evaluations globally, so he was very involved in the process. He was training people up. He was actually involved in reviewing the standards and the like. So, you know, he's very experienced in that area, and he's now left Forbes Travel Guide and has his own consultancy to help hotels deliver better service, basically, based on all of the experience that he has. And he's worked with many of the biggest names in hotels and hospitality, Four Seasons, Rosewood, and everything else. So a year ago, roughly, a little bit longer now, we're having a conversation during a trip to Bangkok, talking about what I do, talking about what he's been doing recently. And I can't remember who's sort of came up with it, but we just sort of realize that there's nothing like this in the fitness industry. And I knew from visiting gyms around the world and supposedly the world's leading fitness cities, the best markets in the world, that we don't do things that well overall. There's some great exceptions. There's some wonderful brands. There's some gyms that are providing fantastic service. But overall, we are not doing a good job in these areas. I knew that because I've been to so many clubs and studios around the world. So I knew there was a need for something like this. I felt the industry now is developed enough to have something like this, right? It's not that new an industry anymore. And like you, Ryan, I'd heard a lot of people say, oh, we could learn so much from hospitality, the best hotels, the best restaurants. I've heard this a lot over the last 10 years. So I knew that this is something that the industry kind of appreciated and realized. So look, we kind of jokingly said over a few beers, let's do it and go 50-50. And it was the next day, it was just running through my head. This is a fantastic opportunity. We've got to do this. You know, we've really got to give it a go. So during his trip, we got together, we made a ton of notes, we made a bit of a plan. I gave him some SOPs that we use at base, which compared to what we evaluate now, it's nowhere near on the same scale. And he took his background and his knowledge to basically develop a version 1, if you will. So we tweaked and refined, then we started testing it out. Then we started visiting a few other clubs in Singapore, in Bangkok, in London, where Matthew's based, and just kind of going through this evaluation process just to kind of give it a go, really. Then some friends that are in the fitness industry and some that are in hospitality went to do their own reviews in clubs. One visited San Francisco, so we did like 3 or 4 of the top gyms there, and we just tweaked and refined. We got feedback from hospitality, from people that Matthew knew, and people in fitness as well. Friends that have gyms, I would go and visit, do an evaluation and go through it with them. And basically 6 months, we did over 100 visits, tweaking and refining the process until we got to our first kind of signed off phase 1. And looking back, that was extremely comprehensive. We've got a couple of things that we might want to tweak for next year, but it really covers pretty much every aspect of the client journey. Now,
well, I would say, just before we go any further, Jack, because
sure.
I was saying to you just offline before we came on, I worked for Marriott for 11 years, and I've never understood how the fitness industry hasn't looked. I mean, this isn't not rocket science stuff you're doing. It's brilliant because it's not there. No one's doing it. But it's just like hospitality's been doing this 30 years or whatever, 40 years probably. They have mystery auditors. They they compare themselves against their market set. And we just don't. I mean, golf do it. There's the 59 Club. I don't know if you've heard of those guys.
But Forbes Travel Guide do golf clubs as well.
Yeah, so that sort of side of it. But probably because they're linked to hotels quite often, you know what I mean? The Marriott's, the Hilton, all those, the golf courses are physically linked to the site, so it gets dragged into that side of it. But how fitness has never really been brought into this. You saw going, one, we struggle with, you were saying earlier, we struggle to have influence in government because we don't have standards, we don't have quality control, we don't have anybody going, this is what your clubs need to be like. One of the big things that when the pandemic happened was they didn't understand what standards and what processes that we did to make sure our clients were safe. Not that they were very good at the time, to be fair, but none of this existed. And it's just like, why hasn't someone just taken the bull by the horn? So for you guys to do it, it's just like, absolutely, this is what we need as an industry.
For sure. And we knew that because private hospitals had it, golf clubs, as you noted, had it, private airlines had it, of course, hotels and restaurants have had it, restaurants for over 100 years. So I knew fitness was ready for this. Didn't need to do any market research. Someone said, oh, did you do like a study group or market research? Like, no, I know fitness is ready for this. And everything that's happened since then has shown that's the case.
And so in terms of the sort of things that you guys look at, what are the sort of, I mean, obviously it's a massive report, I can imagine, but what are the sort of key elements that you guys are focused on with the report?
Yeah, good question. I think no one, well, apart from those who've seen their reports, no one really knows the depth to which we've gone with this process. And as an operator myself, I just can see the value. And we've had Matt, when he was here, he organized some mystery visits to base, some evaluations to base. And so it was good for me to kind of go through the process as well. We did okay, yeah, but it did highlight areas that we need to improve in. We're not perfect at base, and we know that. And so it was good to highlight some things that I thought were happening but weren't. And also it was good to see it from that perspective, because it also meant that I could go to our team and not say, oh, my friend noticed this or our client said this. It's like we've had an independent evaluator go, and it was actually Matt who did it. So, very experienced. And these are the things that we weren't doing. Why do you think this is happening? What can we do to improve? So it was great to kind of be on that operator side and to kind of go through that process. So it's extremely in-depth. There's 250 standards in total.
Wow.
It is based around what hospitality evaluations are. So it's not subjective measures such as, and this is what a lot of mystery shopping is, because we've done a lot of research into that area. Some mystery shopping is quite okay. Nothing is on the scale to what we're doing, but there's a lot of subjectivity. There's a lot of how friendly were the staff on a scale of 1 to 10? How much did you enjoy the visit on a scale of 1 to 10?
Absolutely. And that, unfortunately, that's what mystery shopping is, isn't it? They're taking a snapshot based on an interaction at that moment in time. And so they can only do that. Whereas obviously yours is more, I can imagine there's a lot of back of house stuff in there in terms of their processes and how they run in the business as much as.
So it doesn't go into that because it's the average client experience. So just Michelin Guide and just like Forbes Travel Guide, we can only evaluate from a client perspective. So we send an anonymous evaluator. The club do not know that we're coming. Okay, so when we've launched in New York, none of the clubs knew that we were going to their studios and going to their clubs. And we evaluate the average client experience. So rather than did you enjoy it on a scale of 1 to 10, which will be wildly different if you have 100 people have the exact same experience, it's all yes and no standards. So for example, if it's the arrival process, did they use your name? Did you have to wait longer than X amount of minutes? Did you sign a waiver? Everything is yes or no. On the checkout process, did they ask whether you had a good class or not? How was your session? As a first timer, they should always ask that. There's a lot of, about 9 or 10 around sales and revenue generation. So do they ask questions to understand your needs? Do they encourage you to continue training at the club? If you have more than one session available, do they encourage you to book in another session? It's all basic stuff. There's nothing in there. And we've had so many conversations now and no one's questioned really any of the standards, but there's nothing in there really that every club shouldn't be doing every time. Now,
I can imagine you get a few that have gone, I can imagine you get a few that go, oh, we should be doing that. Just things like asking someone to book their next session. We never even thought of doing that. I can imagine you get a bit of that when they get the thing back.
We've had a whole host of different reactions, to be honest. We've had a little bit of we kind of know our reception isn't that good, and being quite almost like accepting of that fact. They've scored really well in the class experience, the equipment in studio. We've got 5 categories in total, right? So class experience is the most heavily weighted category. So they do great in that. The equipment in the studio is awesome. All of the facilities are great. And when they don't score well in reception services, like, oh yeah, we kind of know we're not very good at that. And just sort of being quite accepting of it, which has been really surprising. Then we have some studios and they're like, oh no, I'm sure our staff do that. And we're like, they definitely didn't. In countries where it's legal, we do record the audio as well. So through the phone as they're checking in or checking out, so we can, do spot checks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Our evaluators are extremely well trained. And there is quite a lot of like, oh, I'm sure our coaches do that. Good example is, and not very many studios are doing this, an injury check. It's just an absolute staple that, especially as you start at a studio, Jack, do you have any injuries? Anything that we should know? And every brand seems to recognize that they should be doing that. We haven't had anyone say, oh, we shouldn't do that. But everyone thinks they're doing it, but hardly any gyms or clubs are.
Wow.
It's definitely lower than 50%. I don't have the stats available now. So we've had some clubs be quite surprised at that. Some operators say, oh, no, I'm sure our coaches do that. They definitely didn't this time round. So I think that's kind of what makes this exciting, is we can kind of have these conversations either on an individual basis or as an industry. We can say, look, only, I don't know, whatever it would be, say 35% of clubs are doing an injury check before the session for first timers. That's not good enough. What can we do to make it better? That's kind of what makes this whole thing exciting, I think.
Well, it's the growth, isn't it? I know when I worked for Marriott, we used to have, they were independent audits, so probably not from a business, not from a customer. We used to have mystery shops, but nothing like yours. But we used to, from an internal, so you'd look at the sales process, but what it made you do, you had to then run your club at audit standard. So all these things you're talking about in terms of making sure they're asking about injuries, booking people in, that then over time, the more they work with you guys, the more that gets showed, the more they go, okay, we need to focus on that. That then becomes the norm, and standards then start improving because they start running their clubs to your standards. You know what I mean? You're showing them that needs to improve, and that does improve. And that's what used to happen with all the audits we used to do with Marriott. You get someone in, you fail on this point, this point, this point. You go, okay, we need to focus. And before long, you were getting 90, 95, 100% scores because you were actually running your business with that focus. Because you're going, whereas before it didn't matter. Now it's being changed. It's the whole thing, isn't it? Inspect what you expect, and all those sorts of. We can come up with. There's loads of those, but if you know what you're looking at, and you know what drives standards and quality, and obviously retention and everything else, and which you guys are showing them, if you guys do all these 250 points, there won't be much wrong with your business.
For sure. A couple of points I'd really like to make there, Ryan, actually, just as going through my head as you're saying that. One, and Matt told me this would happen, but we've seen it now in real time. The clubs that we're now working with to improve their service, just the fact that they train their team, they build it into their SOPs and their training that they need to be doing these things. And they just say, look, we do private evaluations as well, right? So the FitGuide are going to be coming and doing a private evaluation periodically. Usually it's once every 1, 2, or 3 months. Just the fact that they know that any new client that walks through the door could be an evaluator. We have male, female, different ages and everything else. So it could be anyone, instantly improves the service that's being offered. And then, a lot of clubs, especially smaller independents, they're just not building this into their training and their SOPs. They're just showing them how to use MindBody or GlowFox and pretty much like off you go. And so this is kind of shining a light to them a little bit. And so they're like, okay, cool. We need to start thinking about these things. We need to make sure that we do ask their name and we do let them know our name and we do ask them a couple of questions about their training history and we do give them a proper orientation around the gym, stuff that we're just not doing as consistently as we should. So just that accountability alone and building into the training instantly sees better results. Secondly, with that, Ryan, the other point I want to make is we really will want to work with the industry. So any club, anyone who says, look, I don't think this should be a standard, or hey, this should benefit us because we also do this. We're putting together a board of people from the fitness industry from around the world so we can review suggestions, we can review thoughts on the industry. I mean, honestly, so far, everyone's just been really impressed by what we do and the depth of it. We haven't had any suggestions and anyone say, but obviously it will happen. But so far, no one's been like, this shouldn't be a standard, or why don't you include this? But we want to have those conversations. We want that feedback. We want the industry to kind of agree, yeah, this is good and this is right.
I think, because I don't think we can go on to the UK actors and all them, but I don't think they're there to necessarily do that in a minute. So I think having a third party like yours come in and go, right, okay, we have an opportunity. We've got this here. We've got an opportunity to set the standards. All we need is adoption now. We just need people to take this on. So when we come to London, which we'll come on to, when we come to London, we need everybody to adopt into it. And obviously we can grow then that throughout the UK. Same as America. You've gone into New York. Obviously now we need to push that out. And what that does is then if you get one single body, and it may, what will tend to happen is you'll probably find now that you're in there doing this amazing thing, suddenly you'll get another one pop up and another one pop up to act as a competition for you guys. But I'm sure you don't want that, but generally that's what happens, doesn't it?
Sure.
Someone shows success, and then you get people popping up. But all that does is drive the standards of our industry, and that's in order for us to move forward. We have to stop pretending we're great. I mean, I remember during the pandemic, a big thing came out, and it was like they were trying to push that gyms were clean. So UK had to have all these signs coming out going, our clubs are clean, and you just go, they're not though. They're just not. I can go into 100 clubs. I could probably guarantee you 80 to 90 of them wouldn't be clean in the same aspect as what we would expect. From a client's perspective, that club isn't clean. And so, but obviously the industry is saying, yeah, we're clean with this, and we're not. And I think things like yours, this sort of report will help drive that and go, okay, guys, you need to look at this because this is what your client's looking at. They're not looking at that because that's what you're looking at. They're looking at this. The client journeys. Most of the clubs I work with, independent clubs, brilliant owners, you know what I mean? They're passionate, they're everything about them, but they don't sit down and go, okay, from the moment that client inquires, what is the journey along the route? What do we need to plan out to make sure, one, they buy, one, they have a great experience, secondly, they achieve the results. You can't just, and it's the same as staff. People hire staff, brilliant personal trainers, come from, yeah, they've got a great reputation, and then just throw them in the club and expect them then to deliver the standards that your club has. And it just doesn't work like that. You've got to go, this is what we expect. And I guess with the FitGuide, what you're able to do then is go, these are the standards. Whoever comes in, the standards apply to everybody, and it's easy for us to check.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and as I said, these standards are not crazy. There's nothing in there that I think clubs say, oh, we just can't do that. I was speaking to a club owner recently, and he was like, oh, well, I guess it kind of depends on if you have our more experienced coaches or our new coaches. And I was like, well, not necessarily, because we're not evaluating, are they, do they have a sports science level of knowledge in adjusting a squat? We're not doing that. That's just incredibly hard to evaluate. Every coach is going to have a different opinion on it. And we're not saying this workout is better than this workout. We've had a little bit of that as well. Like, oh, I did a class at that brand, but in a different country, and I don't think it's very good, and it shouldn't be 4 stars or it shouldn't be 5 stars. Well, we're not saying this workout is better than this workout. We're saying the experience, the way they put that together, the service is so much better. So ultimately, if you love your workout at a certain club, and for us, it might be 4 stars or even lower than that, perhaps. But if you love it and all your friends are there and you love the community, we'll go and train there. It doesn't necessarily mean you should go to a 5-star studio. But as a new client going into that club, the experience is not very good. They're not doing a lot to more people in the right way, and they're not basically running things as they should do.
Yeah. And have you seen, because obviously you've been doing this, I don't know how long you've been doing your testing for as such, but have you seen significant change on the clubs you've been working with for sort of 6 months or whatever? Have you seen significant changes in their scores over that period, having worked with you?
It's only since we've launched we've actually been working with clubs properly. Before that, we were just test running, basically. So it's only been about 2 or 3 months. But yeah, it almost has an instant effect for the reasons that I spoke of, that they know now what they need to be doing. Many of the clubs just didn't have the training properly run. That was a big issue. So they weren't even really doing role plays. They weren't really saying, to reception staff, hey, make sure that you use their name during the check-in and check-out process. Make sure you ask them, oh, how was the workout? They weren't doing any of these things. They weren't even being trained. So it wasn't their fault. And it wasn't the coach's fault, perhaps, that the class wasn't delivered well. It was basically management's fault. And that was one of the things that we were a bit worried, actually, is that we would give these reports to clubs and they would just go to reception, what are you doing? Like, don't do that. It says that you're not very good. I mean, the first thing you have to look at is you as an owner, as an operator, and taking responsibility for that. Ultimately, you either haven't hired right or you haven't trained right. And there's lots of elements of that. And that's what we want to help clubs improve as well. But if you're hiring right, you're training right, and you're providing the accountability, they will do it well. If you're not doing any of those things right, or if you're missing 1 or 2 of those things, it's not going to be done well. It's as simple as that. And hospitality gets it and understands it.
Oh, absolutely. And do you guys adapt the guide to, because obviously you've got your big box gyms out there, you've got your health clubs, you've got your F45 style base sort of style clubs. Do you adapt the FitGuide to suit, or is it literally the way you've designed it? It's almost a one size fits everything.
Yeah, great question. It's good to clarify some of these things as well. So at the moment, we have gone into the sort of premium boutique sector, if you will. People have got different names for it,
Yeah,
microdream or boutique or whatever it is. But yeah, it's basically your Soul Cycles, your Barry's Boot Camps, Orange Theories, Bases, F45. I mean, London and New York has got a ton of these kind of studios, but let's say Bristol doesn't have that many. I think Tribe is pretty much the only studio that we might evaluate there, kind of in this particular area of the industry. We do want to branch out into big box. It's a little bit less experience based, of course, big box, right? A lot of it is the location, it's the opening hours, perhaps the cleanliness, the range of equipment. And so it's not particularly experience based, although many do operate classes as well, which of course would be. Many still have reception staff, maybe not the 24 hours as much. So we're looking at how we can tweak and refine our standards for that particular segment of the market. For boutiques, we do yoga. This is where we've started, right? Yoga studios, cycling studios, bar, hits and strength studios, and Pilates studios. That's what we've started at. And we haven't included CrossFit, like weightlifting gyms, boxing gyms, because typically it's a little bit grubby. The classes start a little bit late. They're not going to put as much importance on some of these things. Also, we thought, speaking to some CrossFit owners, they actually say CrossFit needs something like this. CrossFit operators, or some CrossFit operators, of course, not all, think that clients don't care about these things, but actually they do. And they're starting to go to other studios. We've worked with a couple of CrossFit gyms and done some private evaluations for them, some one-offs, and they really think that CrossFit needs this. So look, we're seeing which part of the industry needs it. I think all parts of the industry can benefit, but when we get into the more the less service-based parts of the industry, we're going to have to make some tweaks and refinements.
CrossFit's an interesting one because a lot of the way their clubs are, they don't tend to have, the ones I've worked with don't tend to have a reception desk, and they don't tend. So it's almost you walk in through a big garage door and you're into the club. So to get that sort of arrival experience, and it's a lot harder. One for them, but also I can imagine it's a lot harder to evaluate because obviously if that person's coming in, you've not got someone meeting and greeting them. You've got they're almost straight into the class, and even as a newbie. I worked with a CrossFit club near me, and I was probably waiting in the well, you go through their door, there's a really long walkway to where the class is now. But I was waiting there, nothing. There was no. I was like, well, what do I do? And it's that sort of thing. You're sort of going, well, okay, we can work on this, but this is what you got to do. And I guess that's where you guys can come in. And you can sort of go, well, okay, you've got this, but in order to improve. Obviously, you probably failed the first evaluation because the arrival experience and all that. But this is what we can put in place to help you improve that. And that's the sort of thing I do as a consultancy. I guess maybe a little bit harder as a FitGuide as such because you're not necessarily
right. They haven't asked for it, right?
Yeah, you need your
harder.
Consultancy on the side to sort of go, okay, this is the feedback. This is then we will dovetail into and say, okay, this is how we can improve it.
So yeah, we've got the clubs that we choose to visit. So we do a vetting process. Any city that we go into, we would find the clubs that we think would meet our standards. So we're not going to include that sort of garage CrossFit gym. If it's CrossFit, but it looks premium, they've got bathrooms and showers and probably some kind of check-in and check-out service. It's not just one guy and his dog running everything. Then we wouldn't go there, but we would be willing to work with them if they wanted to. But they need to sort of first appreciate that's something they need to improve and they need to work on. I mean, many CrossFit boxes, classes are going to start late. Some people are going to wander in 10 or 15 minutes afterwards. The coaches are going to be on their phone eating a sandwich while they're doing it. And I'm not saying that's to sort of knock CrossFit gyms at all. It's just more of a community-based gym. It's a bit more loosely run. And if the clients love it, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It just doesn't fit well into sort of our more premium or experience-based fitness.
Well, the thing is, it's hard for you to do something like that. You can't. You almost got to go in and go, your whole model's wrong because it doesn't fit our guide. Right. I guess that's the challenge with something like that. Where in actual fact, like you're saying, it's actually probably well run, it's successful. It's just how do you take your guide with its 250 points and go, now we've got to fit it into. It doesn't really work, does it? So,
and that's why we don't want to evaluate those gyms if we don't think they'll fit in, right? If we look at it and it's like a weightlifting gym and it's like spit and sawdust place and it's really good, they got great coaches, but they don't seem to sort of focus on these things. We just won't evaluate it. We'll work with them if they want to improve those things. And we've had a lot of conversations like the CrossFit owner I was speaking of. We've had those conversations where we're like, it doesn't look quite right for us, and like, actually, we really want to improve this. We want to improve our service. We know
I guess that's where you guys got a real opportunity. I mean, the challenge you guys have now is how you grow this and at what speed, isn't it? Because you're sort of going, well, okay, we've got this. This is our market, but we'd like to do this. But ultimately it's time, isn't it? It's like going, where do we go with this, and how do we develop it? And you've got to get your feet on the ground first, get all your tentacles or whatever into the clubs that you want them in, and then you can go, okay, now we've got a steady base. Now we can move to the health clubs. Now we can move to the athletics, whatever it is. But you've got to get that base first. So you guys are at that really early stage, aren't you? Now that you're growing, you're developing. So I guess once you've got that base in place, then you can start going, okay, we can adapt this for X type of club. We can adapt it for that, and move the whole process forward, can't you?
Yeah, well, the tagline for Base, my studio, is build your base. And that's basically what we're doing, right? We're coming into the industry. Yeah. So we've come into the industry. We've gone into the segment which we think is most suited for something like this, which is sort of premium boutique, high-end fitness, your £20 classes, your £25 classes. That's where the segment that's most naturally suited to this. We'll start there. And as you said, we'll see where else in the industry needs there. I mean, I do think there's that kind of sort of premium big box, looking at your kind of Equinoxes or some of these sort of private members clubs, which have shown some interest in this. But I think, your chains, your Jets, your Fitness Firsts, I think ultimately it does come down a lot. So like, when are they open? Does it have the equipment I need? And how busy and clean is it? So it's
I think quite a lot of those as well. What I find with as a consultant, it's also trying to get into those businesses. So the likes of Fitness First, the likes of maybe not Jets, because they're a bit more not they don't really staff them that much, if you know what I mean. They're almost like a pure gym, but with a few more staff, if that makes sense. But there are a lot of clubs out there that could benefit, even from 3D, from JD clubs. All those would all benefit from this sort of thing. But the challenge you have with trying to get into those sorts of businesses is they have a structure. So you'll have from the CEO down, from regional managers and everything else, that obviously that's particularly their role to do. So, but I think in order for the industry to go forward, something like what you guys do has to start filtering into those bigger leisure chains, because that filters then down to everyone. If we can get the standards throughout, and I think you're probably going to have to work not from the bottom up, because obviously you're working with premium clubs, but you're having to work with those independents and that style boutique, and then prove your point and then get into those, because ultimately those guys are the ones with the big money and the power to make changes and influence in the industry. So ultimately we need them to grasp the standards as well and go across the board, these are the standards this industry needs. But I guess you've got to start somewhere, and I think you've made a really good start. When do you guys come to the UK? Because obviously you launched in New York, was it last month?
Yes. Yeah, a few weeks ago. We're launching in London on May the 9th. So We're just a couple of weeks away now. So we've done all of the evaluations, all of the reports have been done. We're just setting up conversations now with the club owners and operators, which has been, really good, really interesting.
Well, what we'll do, Jack, we'll put your details at the end as well. So if there are boutique clubs in terms of London, is it within the M25? What's the scope you guys are looking at within?
Yeah, we haven't gone sort of geographically as much. It's more like we look for the top 50 clubs, and then we have a system for the chains, right? So let's use Barry's Bootcamp as an example, right? So if it's 1 to 3 locations, we would try and find the one that's a bit more of a flagship or a premium location. If they have 4 to 9 locations, we would evaluate 2 at the moment. And if they have 10 or more, we would evaluate 3. And then we have a bit of a different system if they have multiple concepts. So for example, one rep will have 5 different concepts. So we've evaluated 5 different clubs, and then each of their 5 concepts, if that makes sense. Soul Cycle in New York have, I think, 12 or 13 locations. So we've evaluated 3. And so we've more looked at like the most prime, the most sort of quote unquote flagship, and then the top 50. But look, moving forwards, we want to expand that out, of course. I mean, if you just take Barry's Bootcamp as one example, obviously a top brand, 7 locations. We'd like to get all of them on the FitGuide eventually, but we've had to start with 50 in each city, which is, it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into evaluating the top 50 clubs.
How long does your evaluation take?
Oh, so the visit is an hour typically the class is 45 minutes to 60 minutes. We do a lot to make sure that the club has every opportunity to do the things it needs to do. So our evaluator's never going to run in 2 minutes before the class starts, quickly signing waivers or anything like that. So they arrive early, at least 20 minutes before the session, to really give the reception team every opportunity to do all the things that they should be doing. On the way out, they will inquire about the packages. We don't just run out the door and expect them to grab us and say, right, here's the packages, here's your options, what do you want to do? We will kind of almost lay it on a plate for them, right? We'll make an inquiry that really means they should be doing everything that we evaluate them to do. For example, asking questions to understand your needs more. If I say, I've just moved to London and I'm interested in packages, well, they should say, okay, Jack, how often do you want to train? What's your goals? What time of day do you train? Something like that, right? These are basic things that every club should be doing, but many aren't, right? They should make a strong recommendation on which package is right. They should be comfortable talking about the packages and the options. So we give them every opportunity to score each point. And so that means the evaluator has to stay for about half an hour before and half an hour afterwards. Then they go through the actual process of, doing the evaluation. They've taken photos through the visit. Like I said, if it's legal, they would have recorded some audio. In different countries, they have different rules around things like that. They're very well trained to sort of pick up on everything that they need to pick up as well. It takes between an hour and a half to 2 hours, sometimes more for our new evaluators. And then that gets not edited as such, but kind of reviewed by someone who's in hospitality, who's been doing this for a long time. At the moment, it's Matt, but we have other members of staff that can do this as well. They have the background in hospitality to go through that and say, can you elaborate a little bit more on this point? So, because we have to provide sort of evidence for each one. Every single no standard that's scored has to come with a backing comment, right? So again, it's hard to really describe how in depth it is, but when you see one of these reports, you are like, wow, there's a lot here. And because it's so thorough, it makes it very difficult for clubs to be like, no, that didn't happen. No, we do that every time, because you look at the report and you're like, you just can't say anything. And we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of club owners, and what's been really good for me to see and for the team here at the FitGuide to see is no club owner has said this is bullshit. You just can't say that because of the depth of it. So you're looking at a good 5 to 6 hours in total for each evaluation. So times that by 50, and there's a lot that goes into launching a city.
Oh no, absolutely, and I think it's needed though. I think it's good for the industry. It's good for standards across the board. It's good for customers, obviously. So hopefully we'll take these brands that are doing a great job already, and it just moves them to the next level. And obviously everybody else then realizes to keep up with them, they've got to come up to speed as well. So as you guys grow, obviously, so hopefully the standards will improve as well. In terms of what you do.
I can just add something to that quickly, Ryan. Just to add a little something to that. I think this is a really good leveler as well. Like if you have an independent brand and you're thinking, well, how can I compete with the Soul Cycles and the Barriers of the world, right? These big, sexy brands that have got tons of money. Well, actually, any gym or any club can hit these standards. If you invest into it, there might be certain standards around maybe the facilities that might not be quite up to Barrier standards, but you have to hit 90% to get 5 stars. So you can maybe not have the super sexy showers and bathrooms, but if you're doing an amazing job with all of your team, you're providing great service, you're really connecting with the clients, you're showing them there's a community there, we've got standards around all of this stuff. I actually think it's a fantastic leveler. If you're not a well-known brand, you can actually be up against these top brands. And not all of the top brands have got 5 stars, far from it. Out of the 50 clubs we evaluated in London and New York, 5 clubs in each city got 5
I saw
stars.
one of the Orange Theories they were celebrating the other week because they got 5-star and they were only 1 of 5 or 1 of 4 or whatever it was. I was like, that's but that's good. The thing is though, you can't, if your guide was too easy to get 5-star and everyone was getting it, it sort of devalues what you guys are doing, because you're sort of going, do you know what I mean? It's a bit like a McDonald's badge. Here you go. There's your badge. And that's not what you guys want. You guys want to be something that they have to aspire to, that you don't just have someone turn up and go, right, there's your 5-star badge. Well done. For sure. Let's move on. They have to earn it. They have to deliver these points. And that's what I found in hospitality when I worked in hospitality. We weren't guaranteed our score that we got. There was repercussions obviously there's not repercussions here, but there's repercussions if you didn't achieve. You had to work for it. You had to have the standards in place. You had to have the training in place, and you had to have the quality in place. And if it wasn't there, you didn't get the score. And I think that's the important of it. For your validity and for people to want to invest in what you guys are doing, it has to have almost a pass and fail in that sense. Okay, you've got the 1 to 5 star. Obviously, you wouldn't celebrate a 1, but you've got that in there. They sort of go, okay, you only got 3 stars this time, but these are the elements you need to work on. Yeah. And then they can work on it next time, next month, 3 months, whatever it is. They reevaluate and they get 5. They can celebrate that, and they've done the hard work and everything else. So I think that's really important that standard is maintained, so that a 5-star has value.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't mean anything if everyone gets it right. We've had different conversations with people in the industry. I mean, some really get it. I mean, there's one club operator that we spoke to in the States, and they didn't score particularly well, but they were all over it. They knew the fitness industry needed it. They wanted to improve. We've worked with them to help them improve as well. But they kind of, even though they didn't do well, they saw the importance. Of course, we've also had club owners that just want that 5 stars, right? They're not happy that they're 4 stars even, which I get. I totally get it. I want to be 5 stars as well, and I totally understand. But again, once they see the depth of our process and everything that we do with the evaluation, that they usually come around and realize that actually 4 stars is very good. That's better than most in the industry. And it's something to strive for, when they can build up so that actually really means something. We had one club owner say, on ClassPass and Google reviews were 5 stars. So, we feel like we should be 5 stars here. And it's like, well, everyone's 5 stars on Google reviews because their mum, their friends all put reviews, all of their best clients. Or maybe some clubs get dragged down because other clubs are leaving them fake negative reviews. You've got all of this stuff, right? So, and then ClassPass 4.5 is actually really bad because almost everyone just gives 5 stars. So everyone is like 4.5 to 4.9. So it doesn't really mean anything anymore. We want this, as you've noted, to really mean something. If FitGuide's given you 5 stars, they provide exceptional service across the board. It's as simple as that. We do also, Ryan, have a class experience award. So like some gyms, they might not have great facilities. Some don't even have showers in the States, especially. And so we wanted to have something which said, okay, the facilities maybe aren't great. Maybe the check-in and check-out isn't great, but man, the class is bang on. Because some people, that's kind of really what they focus more on. So we have an overall award and we do have class experience. So, we recognize different clubs for what they're doing well.
Oh, nice one. Well, I think that gives us a really good insight into what you guys are doing. And I guess what will be interesting is get you guys on 6-12 months time again and sort of go, okay, with all these clubs and the data you've got, how is the industry? Have we seen improvements? Are you, because it may be once you launch in London and you start getting these stats, you go, oh my God, how bad is it? You know what I mean? Or you may go,
it's not bad. We've already crunched the numbers a little bit and it's not bad.
Well, that's a good sign, I guess. But you may just find these trends and you may, and that's the sort of thing that'll be really interesting for people like me as a consultant, for people in the industry to sort of go, okay, what are these trends? What are the sort of things that, so it may be across the board, the arrival experience is dreadful. We're not, I always train my clubs on the Fab 5. So it's eye contact, smile, hello, goodbye, every member, every time. But you'd be amazed at how many clubs don't say hello.
Straight away, that gets a lot of our standards. If they just did those things, straight away, they're going to score quite well.
Well, it was something we brought it. We had at Marriott. It was basically like we didn't allow people to scan themselves in. We took their card so we could read their name and say, "Oh, welcome to the club, Jack. Have a great training session." Just stuff like that, which is easy to do. But what most clubs do, because it's easier for them, is they'll put the scanner on the desk. Someone scans themselves and walks in. They don't even get hello because the receptionist's got their head down doing something else. And you're like going, guys, you have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Just take their card and scan it, give it them back with their name. It's taking you 2 seconds. It's not really interrupted your work. They've had a greet. One of the biggest reasons why people, I can remember listening to Paul Bedford years ago. One of the biggest reasons for leaving a club, one's cleanliness. And the second one is that no one speaks to them, whether it be a member of staff or whatever. And our regional manager was a member, I won't say the club, he was a member of down in Portsmouth. He was there 5 years and they had a proper, David Lloyd style. It wasn't David Lloyd, but David Lloyd style, swipe in and walk yourself in. They never spoke to him once in 5 years. And you just
becomes a commodity then, right? You're just a commodity like every other gym. You're going to go somewhere else. It's a little bit cheaper. If it's just a place to lift weights and run on a treadmill, you're going to go to the cheaper place that opens up next door. But if it's more than that, then you're going to stay, even if somewhere's 10, 20, maybe even 50% cheaper somewhere else. And that's
absolutely. And this is the important thing. And it's what your guide will do, and it'll start highlighting those sort of areas. Go as an industry. I mean, this is brilliant for you guys because you sort of go, okay, as an industry, 70% of our clubs don't do X well.
Right.
This is what we can support with. This is why you need us. This is what we can support. And I think for the likes of me as a consultant and other industry, and we can take that data. Not that you necessarily want to share, but you can take that data.
We do.
Okay, this is where we need to work on as an industry to improve it. This is what we need to do. And our focus might be sales, but you're looking at going, actually, the evidence is showing it doesn't matter how well we do the sales, the arrival experience or the exit experience just isn't there, and that's why we're losing business. So
we absolutely will be doing this. We want to share our data. So, I mean, one thing I'd love everyone that listens to this to do is to subscribe to our free newsletter. Every single Wednesday, we put out this data. We give tips on improving this. So the first newsletter we put out, for example, we're 42, but it's actually changed with a few more evaluations that we've done. 37% of clubs, and these are premium clubs, don't forget, you might spend $40 a class in the US. They're not using the name at all in check-in and check-out. Sorry, 37% are. So that means 63% are not doing that. And that's just an absolute hospitality fundamental, right? If you looked at 5-star hotels, it'd probably be 98 or 99 or hopefully even 100%. So, a third of clubs or a little more than a third are using name on check-in and check-out. We just don't think that's good enough. The stats that we're putting out, or that we put out last week in the newsletter, 70% of clubs are finishing their classes on time in New York. London's a little bit better than that. Singapore's a similar number. So 30% are finishing their classes late. And so I did a poll on LinkedIn, and 100% of people said classes should finish on time. And I'm like, well, we're just not seeing that in the industry. One club finished 18 minutes late, which is just insanity.
Did they have a class afterwards?
No, they didn't. No, they had it was like the last class, I guess, of the of the part. I mean, I did a club in London. Again, I won't say the name. And this is, again, one of the things that I was thinking about when we developed the FitGuide. I did a class in London. The class was good, and it ran 10 minutes late. We were actually doing me and my girlfriend were doing 2 classes back to back. So we had to get to another class, and we were in a mad rush to get there. We didn't realize it was 10 minutes late. But really interestingly, they had a 10-minute gap between classes. So we came out, the cleaning team were rushing in and trying to clean everything up. The other clients were the class ended up starting late the next one. Everyone looked confused. The coach looked really flustered. There was equipment everywhere. It was just an absolute mess because the coach didn't plan the class in the correct way, so it finished on time. So you kind of saw this knock-on effect where, okay, one standard would be missed. Well, it's actually 2 if it's more than 2 minutes late and more than 5 minutes late. So they would miss 2 standards there. But actually the effects of that is that all sorts of other standards would be missed. He didn't get a chance to welcome any first-timers in the next class. The training space was messy. So, it has a big knock-on effect, right, when you don't get these things right.
And it is a simple thing as well. It's not a hard thing to do. I don't think.
Right?
So.
Shouldn't be.
No,
so we'll be getting out stats on this, and we're happy to share that with you as well, Ryan. Sign up to the newsletter, but if there's anything, feel free to just send an email through, and we'd be happy to share some of this, because I would love if consultants are using our data. Look, only 40% of gyms are asking questions to clients to understand their needs. So let's make sure you're one of the 40%, and you're already going to be beating 60% of clubs. That's what we want to happen for sure.
Absolutely, and I think if we can do that and encourage people, even if it's just to take that basic data that you guys release and use that, and hopefully then they start going, okay, now I've got that, maybe it'd be worth getting these guys in to do a full check, see where I'm at. And I think that's the, and obviously you guys grow, the standards grow, and everything else. Now, we had you on for a long time, Jack. So just one more question before we let you go. Well, a couple of questions. One, what's next? What are the plans? What's it looking like? The sort of pathway.
Yeah, so we have London launching in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure when this is going out, but it might be launched already. So just go to thefitguide.com and you can see London. We have Singapore launching a month after that, just before the Fit Summit. So it'll be early June. We have 2 more cities lined up, big worldwide fitness cities that we're evaluating currently, but we haven't announced yet. And then we're kind of weighing up our moves after that. The US has received this really well. We've had so many good conversations there. There's so many brands that have 10, 20, 50, 100, 500 locations, really all throughout the US.
As a culture, they're used to it, though, a little bit more than probably the UK. So it's probably not a bad place to have launched.
For sure, yeah. I think, London's really the only city where we could launch in the UK, really, that has enough clubs kind of in the segment that we're currently evaluating. But the US, it's a much bigger thing. So, look, we're not neglecting the rest of the world, but it looks like, and the conversations we've had as well, US club owners and operators typically really get what we're doing. They're a bit more service focused typically, I think. And so it feels like a more natural path for us to really hit the US hard. But yeah, we'll see.
Exciting times. And one final question is, in terms of inspiration. Now, we always ask all of our guests who inspires you or what inspires you. Now, we try and avoid family unless you've got an amazing family story, just because we know family inspires everybody. I mean, my dad's a huge inspiration for me. So, but what sort of about the industry or who in the industry inspires you to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I will quickly say a family member because my uncle is 69. And he just did a 300-kilometer run across the UK.
Wow.
And so I want to be that man when I'm 69
Absolutely.
years old. He won his age category and he does all these crazy
That's
endurance
amazing.
feats. So I will say my uncle, even though you said not to do family. Outside, man, there's so many in the fitness industry. There really are. I mean, for me, as I first got into podcasts before I set up the Fitness Business Asia podcast, I was following a lot of Bedros Keuilian. So he's still a big sort of personality in fitness and business now. And he was just sort of the first one I listened to that I really resonated with. He made me address some of the issues that I had, such as framing sales in the wrong way, maybe getting over some of my sort of preconceived notions about business. So now I don't listen to him as much. I've kind of listened to a whole host of different personalities and people who speak on the industry, but I think he sort of caught me at a great moment, and I really needed to hear what he was saying at that time. So I'll say Bedros Keuilian. Look, it's still great, puts out some great content. I think especially if you're just sort of looking to get into the industry and maybe launch your first business, I think he's fantastic.
We'll try get him on.
Yeah, he's a busy guy, but yeah, maybe you will. I did try with the Fitness Business Asia podcast, but I couldn't get him on. So
could you not?
See.
Well, if I get him on mine, I'll see if I can get him on yours.
Okay, deal.
Really appreciate your time this morning, or whatever. I think it's evening over there, isn't it now?
Early evening, yeah.
Yeah, so really appreciate you coming on. I mean, it's fascinating. I wish you all the luck with it, because I think the industry needs it. And then what we'll do, definitely get you back on in probably early next year, whatever, to see how it's all gone and the stats and talk it through. So really appreciate your time. We'll put all your links at the end of the podcast. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they just need to click on those links or send you a message, and then obviously you can reach out to them. So thank you very much for your time, and we will catch you again soon, Jack.
Cheers, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Let me just switch that off.